Write what's in your heart, write what you're going to stick with, write what you're going to be excited about and promote and live and breathe, than trying to somehow follow a trend. And I'm sure you've heard that before too, and maybe I've even told people that. And I always tell people, don't give up on your dream of telling this particular story.
We'll talk about this and much more today. Welcome to a Writer's Day podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to a Writer's Day podcast. My name is Ruth and I'm an award-winning best-selling author of books in various genres, and right now I'm settling on suspense. And my next suspense novel comes out in April, and I will be revealing the cover and the title soon. So head over to my website at artbyruth.com to sign up for my newsletter, because newsletter subscribers will be the first to know and be able to pre-order my story. And I'll have more information about that story coming soon. And when you sign up for my newsletter, you'll receive a free PDF of my short story support group, which gives you a taste of my speculative writing style. And if you like today's episode, head over to subscribe at YouTube and follow me at Spotify and wherever you listen to podcasts. And let me know, shoot me a comment. Let me know what you think of today's episode. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Okay, let's get started. My guest today writes memoirs. That's right. She's going to tell us a little bit about how and why you should write a memoir. Patricia L. Brooks is with me today, and she's been a university faculty associated with ASU and Paradise Valley Community College here in Phoenix, Arizona for years. She is an author of memoirs, and she has a lot to tell us about what it takes to write a memoir. So you know the drill. Grab your favorite beverage, a comfortable chair, kick back and relax as we listen to Patricia L. Brooks talk about the art of memoir writing. Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm so excited to have Patricia L. Brooks with me today to talk about memoir writing. This is a first for a Writer's Day podcast. So welcome, Patricia.
Thank you.
This is so exciting. I have never had anybody come on to talk about memoir writing. But first, why don't you introduce yourself to my listeners? Tell us how you became an author.
Well, I became an author sort of by default, even though I enjoyed writing and all of that way back to high school, college, and I always wrote different things for newspapers, little editors, business publications, and so forth. But I really wanted to write a book, and I actually wanted to write a book because I have 2 business degrees and a business background about marketing, but that was not God's plan, because my sister was diagnosed with lung cancer about 30 years ago, and I had just started roughing out this business book, and of course that just went by the wayside. Before she passed away, she knew I was going to write a story about her, about our relationship, and so that's my Gifts of Sisterhood book. It's a journey from grief to gratitude. So that's really how it started. Even though I had a writing path, it was very different from the path that I took forward. And once I wrote that first memoir, I was hooked. I just loved it. And I took a lot of classes, even a class. I was teaching at Paradise Valley Community College, and I took a class at Phoenix College about writing, and I was just hooked. So that was the beginning of my journey. And then I wrote 2 other memoirs before I wrote my current book I'm promoting, which is a nonfiction about writing memoir. But to backtrack a little bit, my second memoir was 3 Husbands and 1,000 Boyfriends. And I have a very happy third husband. He's the last chapter in the book. And it was fun to write it. I did have a lot of boyfriends, high school, college. I was married twice and divorced twice in my 20s. And I figured it all out eventually with a lot of therapy and understanding love addiction, which is childhood abandonment. So I write a lot about that, really to help people. All of my books are to help other people, especially women. And I try to take that focus. I have a thing on my wall in front of my computer, and it says, my goal today is to help someone else. And then my third memoir was written about 6 years ago, I believe. I don't know, it just all runs together. Anyway, and that's called Sick as My Secrets. And I have 42 years of recovery from alcohol. And alcohol is a huge issue with women, especially young women. And I wanted to tell my story. I'm very involved with the recovery movement. I've spoken at conferences, at lots of different meetings, hospitals, treatment centers, and I put it all in the book. But all of my books, even though they're very serious topics, are all spiritually based, and they're all with a positive upswing at the end. So after writing those three memoirs, then I decided it was time to write a book about writing memoir. I have taught memoir classes for a lot of different areas here in town, in the Scottsdale area, with the library, the school, churches. But my latest gig, for lack of a better word, is that I teach writing memoir at ASU at the Piper Writing Center. And I do that a couple times a year, sometimes in-house, sometimes on Zoom. And I'll be doing that again in about a month on a Zoom call. But that's an 8-week program. But I love getting other people excited about not being afraid to write their memoir. That's really the key, is that so many people are afraid to tell their stories, and our stories help each other. They bind us together. They connect us. They're who we are and what we're about. And so that's really the main goal of teaching the class, is to get people to move over that line and say, I really want to do this. I have a story to tell. So in a nutshell, those are my books. And that's my writing life. The only other thing I'll mention is that I did start a women's writers club, which you were a wonderful speaker for us a few months ago. I did that about 20 years ago, and we're still rolling along. And that's part of my goal of helping others, especially women writers. So.
Yes, it's the Scottsdale Society of Women Writers, a terrific
Yes.
group, lovely women.
Thank you.
And one thing I wanted to ask, though, before we get into how to write a memoir, because I kind of want to pick your brain about that, is
Okay.
when you were young, did you find that storytelling was like a gift for you? Were you able to do it?
Well, I always say I'm half Irish, and that kind of sums it up. You know, I come from a family of storytellers, and some were, excuse me, some were exaggerated stories. I think back on different family members. My Aunt Madge, my dad's sister, she loved to tell stories, and my dad was a storyteller. Just family stories, the family history. I have genealogy on both sides of my family. My mother's side is French. All of them immigrated through Canada and then into the
Wow.
US. And so I have lots of genealogy, but that really came from just somebody. Well, my dad's brother and my mother's brother both traced the genealogy back, hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But the stories were already there. And we used to fight for our time at the kitchen table to tell us some kind of story. I had three sisters, and we loved to. There was always conversation at the dinner table, and I grew up in that era where you had to be at the dinner table at 6 o'clock because my dad was sitting down to dinner, and yeah, lots of it was just part of me. And like I said, I love that in school. I loved writing stories, especially in high school, and then just went on from there. And I knew when my sister was dying that I had to tell our story, because I had a really wonderful relationship with my younger sister.
Mm.
And, I was her babysitter at one time. Then we became confidants and shared a lot of the same journey. And that's where it started, really.
That's fascinating. I do find that it tends to be a cultural thing, the storytelling, the gift and
Hmm.
the skill of storytelling. That's wonderful. We have a
Hmm.
lot in common. I mean, my sister passed away from cancer as well, so I'll definitely have to read your book. Thanks for sending it to me. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Well, what sets a memoir apart from an autobiography? Because I know the writers I speak with tend to get it confused. So what's the difference between a memoir and an autobiography?
Well, that's a great question. And that I think is just about my first slide when I do lead into my class, because you're correct. So many people get it um, intertwined. They're two
Mhm.
very different things. An autobiography basically is front to back the story of your life. Biography, somebody else writes for you, but autobiography, you can write your own story, but it's your entire story. A memoir is about a theme. It's a theme that was important to you, that changed your life, that has value to you, value to your family. An example is my three books. The first one's about grief. The second one's about love addiction and relationships. It's my relationship book. The third one's about recovery, women in recovery. So, and that's the first one of the first things I talk about in the class is to think about what is the theme that you want to talk about in your first memoir. And the beauty of memoir is you can write more than one. Obviously, I've written
Mhm.
three, and my husband's written two, and we've helped a lot of other people do that. But the important thing is that you have a theme, that you work your stories around the theme. It can include kind of front to back information, but it ties into that theme of what you're trying to get across in the book. And of course, then you wrap it up at the end, maybe come all the way full circle and wrap it up at the end to give people solutions and ideas. And so that's the
Mm.
main difference.
Okay, yeah, that clears it up. And that's what I wanted listeners to understand, because when I go to conferences and I ask some writers, what do you write? Oh, I'm working on a memoir. And then they proceed to tell me about it, and it's an autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not
Yes.
like an expert to tell them the difference. But I really wanted my listeners to understand that if you're going all the way back to when great grandma immigrated from Germany, no, that's an autobiography. This focus
Mm-hmm.
on, like you said, a theme, a chapter, a portion of your life that matters. And another thing I wanted to ask, and this is something that I also talk to people who write nonfiction, is you kept mentioning that you had a story to tell, and I really stress this to folks who write nonfiction and memoirs.
Mm-hmm.
You're still telling us a story. And so, how do you instruct your students to make sure they have those story components in their memoirs?
Well, first of all, I tell them that you should be reading memoir as well
Mm.
as fiction when you're writing. You need to be reading something all the time. And if you aren't somebody that's read 1,000 memoirs like I have, I'm like addicted to people's stories, but you need to read them and to understand the way they're written. You're not stealing anything from anybody. You're just getting a better understanding of memoir. And number one, obviously, we can't remember verbatim a conversation, but you can put enough conversation to have some dialogue in your memoir. I didn't do that with my first one, but my other two memoirs have dialogue in them. And I think it's really important, which is a big factor in writing fiction.
Mhm.
Also, I think it's really important to have to hook people in the beginning. Uh, so you might have a chat. Don't have to do it chronologically because you're not writing your autobiography. So you can have that hook in chapter in the beginning or some teasers or something, which is part of fiction as well. So there are some fiction elements that
Mm.
are in writing memoir. And also you want to have it, the crescendo and have some type of a leveling off period where something happens, that gets people's attention, and you're building to that, and you're giving out, as I said, teasers, and then you level off and go to the end and give us solutions, um, your perspective, your opinion. It's an opportunity to really give us all of what you know and feel about the topic. But the main thing is that you write it with the idea that you're bringing people in. So you're setting up scenes, you're setting up um, just describing locations, describing a culture, possibly describing characters, the different people. So don't just mention somebody's name. And yes, you can change the names. I never did. My
Mhm.
first book, I didn't use anybody's name and I didn't use dialogue. I would have done that differently, but it was really a tribute to my sister.
Mm.
So that was why it was different than the other two. But I didn't change names. I just used first names. And I haven't had anybody say to me, I'm going to sue you and you put me in your book. The old philosophy is, don't have bad behavior in my life because you might end up in one of my books. And, that's kind of a tongue in cheek comment that writers make. But anyway, I try to get people to think beyond just documentation. You're not a news reporter. You're not just documenting your life. You're going deep into the emotion, the things that you saw, how you feel about it. I had three sisters. We all view the way our parents raised us, things that happened very differently, very differently. And most families can say that.
That's true. And I love that because you are taking the reader on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most writers of memoir, they go in super excited about it because they feel that what happened to them was really unique and significant and they want to tell this story. But I know a lot of publishers are looking for something that they consider to be unique. So if I was going to write a story about my sister's cancer diagnosis and everything, that's going to be one of probably 75 million books out there about someone who
Mm-hmm.
is diagnosed with cancer. So, what has to make it so special, to stand out, to make it so significant and unique? Because we all feel like, oh, my life story would be so wonderful. So, how do you advise your students to make sure that their story is unique?
Well, the first thing is to know that it is. We're all like snowflakes, and I always tell them, remember, we're all a snowflake, and we're all different. So what they need to do is keep telling and retelling the story until those what I call emotional beats come up to them. That's the uniqueness of their story. Because yes, like my writing about my recovery, there are so many recovery books out
Yeah.
there. That's a great example. I mean, people have been in recovery for hundreds of years. So, and when I wrote about grief, the same thing.
Mm.
But I'll tell you what's interesting, what was unique about my story about my sister. When I first decided, and I was first going through the grief even before she died, and we knew she was dying, I looked for books that were about grieving siblings. Now we're talking 30 years ago, 20, she's been gone about 26 years. But I couldn't find anything about grieving siblings. And I can
Oh.
honestly say that. And I searched and searched and searched. So, and anyway, there were more books, honestly, about grieving losing your pet than losing your sibling.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I knew that was a niche that I could
Mm-hmm.
jump into, the relationship that you have with one of your siblings, because they're your first relationship. They're in your life, good, bad, or indifferent, forever. And even after they're gone, I mean, my sister's still in my life. I
Mm-hmm.
think of her almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the niche, was that I knew there weren't enough books out there about grieving the loss of a sibling. So that's what I tell them to do, is take the theme that you have, the story that you have, and keep writing and go deeper and deeper into your emotional beats. And you'll figure out that little nugget that makes your story different than somebody else. And well, another good example is one of my sisters is in recovery right now from stage 4 breast cancer. She's about 3 years into it. And lots of books written about having breast cancer. I mean, God help these women. It's been around for a long time, but everybody that's written a book about their cancer experience, written it themselves or had a sibling write it, it's still going to be different.
Yeah.
Everybody's experience is different. It has to do with the way you were treated, how you reacted to it, your attitude, your faith, everything. So it's really digging deeper and deeper till you find your, like I call it, your golden nugget, for lack of a cliche, but that's what it is.
It's true. I remember listening to a podcast called the Rich Roll podcast, and he had written a book, a memoir, about his life, and it was about recovery and how he used running to help him recover from drug and
Mm-hmm.
alcohol
Mm-hmm.
addiction. And as I was reading his book, I thought, this is so significant because he had a troubled relationship with his father. He was a high pressure, high stakes lawyer in Los Angeles, making, millions of dollars a year, using cocaine to get through each day, and then drinking alcohol to relax at night, and he became addicted. And but he takes us back to when he was in college. He could have been an Olympic swimmer, but because of alcohol, he got kicked off the team, and that was like the downward spiral. And I thought, see, that is unique. Like you said, there's
Right.
so many stories of recovery, but that made him unique. And then how he got clean, and then one day he decided to just get off the couch and go for a run. And he ran 16 miles, and it was no
Mm-hmm.
problem. And then he ran back, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought there's another unique twist to it. So that just
Mm-hmm.
really got me interested in turning the page. I wanted to find out what else happened. So you're right. If
Mm-hmm.
you could just look at your story and see what sets it apart from the others. I remember at a writing conference, I was sitting at a table and a little old lady was telling me, what she wanted to write about. And she said, "Oh, I'm working on a memoir." And in my head, I'm thinking, "Oh, okay, here we go. Another memoir." So I just smiled and I said, "Really? What's it about?" And she said, "Well, I was married and I had a couple of children. I was going through a hard time. And so when my husband died, I decided to be a nun." And I just went, "What?" And
Wow.
her life story was about how she became a nun, went into the church and became a nun. And I thought, okay, now that is an incredible story. Tell me your story. So it's fascinating how you're right. We can share our life stories, but we have to really stop and focus on the theme and what makes it unique. And then,
Interesting about that person you're talking about is I've known two or three people that were in the nunnery and were nuns, and then they came out
and they switched, yeah.
and they got married, and wear lipstick and short skirts and the whole thing. I know two people like that, and so it's interesting that somebody would choose to go in. I'm Catholic, so of course I always find it fascinating that somebody
Yeah.
would make that decision, even though I've certainly known people growing up, that made that
Hmm.
decision from it.
Yeah, and my mom was like this lady. She always loved the church and wanted to be a nun. And I asked her years, later, I think she was in her 50s. I said, "Would you do it now if you had the chance?" She said, "Absolutely." So I always
Isn't
thought
that
that was
interesting?
interesting. Yeah, yeah, she loved it.
Yeah.
So I know there's so many nonfiction books out there, and it
Yes.
can kind of prevent people from, going forward on their journey. So, what advice do you give your students for sticking with it and trying to get their book published?
Well, first of all, I tell them if this is the book that you've chosen to write, then this is the book you're supposed to write. And I think that's really important. And I've noticed because I published my first book almost 20 years ago. Well, I'd say around 20 years ago. Went to a lot of conferences, and when I used to pitch the book, I've independently published all my books, but I've always pitched every book at a national conference just for the experience. And 20 years ago was very different pitching a nonfiction book or a memoir than it is today. There's a whole different respect of the genre than there was back then. I had read tons of nonfiction books because I was in the business world in a couple different capacities and was always going to hear some speaker here in town that had a book selling out the back of the room and all of that. So nonfiction didn't seem difficult to me. That's really why I chose nonfiction in the beginning, thinking that was going to be my first book until my sister's diagnosis. But now today, there are always segments in every conference. I just bid on speaking at a couple conferences for this year, and there's always a segment for memoir, for nonfiction that there really wasn't 25, 30, 25 years ago, let's say. So I think that's a really important thing is if you know in your heart this is what you want to write, it's what you should write.
Hmm.
And don't write because you think, well, what's really let's say 10 years ago, cookbooks were really popular.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a cook. I've done much better in my third marriage than I ever did with cooking. But I why would I write a cookbook when I have no interest in writing a cookbook, even if it was commercially successful and the number one books that were selling were cookbooks 10 years ago. So it's sort of the same concept is
Hmm.
write what's in your heart, write what you're going to stick with, write what you're going to be excited about and promote and live and breathe. than trying to somehow follow a trend. And I'm sure you've heard that before too, and maybe I've even told people that. But that following a trend is just the worst thing you can do to the writing person that's in your soul. And so that's why I always encourage people, just stick with it. And you never know who's going to read your book, tell somebody about your book, pick up a copy at a table where you're selling books or a conference, or you give somebody a bookmark. I'm living proof with things that have happened in my life, that it just takes one person to turn your life around. And I always tell people, don't give up on your dream of telling this particular story, whatever it is. And because you don't know who you're going to meet on your road of promoting the book.
That's true. And I always call it the why. Make sure if someone were to ask you, why are you writing this book, that you have a definitive answer, and that it's not to make a lot of money, because that's probably not going to happen.
Right.
But if you could dig deep down inside, why do you need to write this story? You should have an answer. Because I don't know about you, but I've been approached by many people at my booths at different events. Why did you write this story? And I always make sure I have an answer. And like you, I feel though I want to make sure people see light and hope in my stories, even if it's about a serial killer. Ironically, my serial killer book was the most Christian book I wrote.
And, good for you.
Yeah, even if it's a serial killer book, if it's a psychological thriller, you should still have some light and hope in your story. So that goes with a nonfiction and a memoir as well. Be able to answer the why. Well, thank you, Patricia. This has been wonderful. You've really answered all my questions, and it got me excited about memoir writing. And I know my listeners out there are excited too, because like you said, everybody has a story to share, and they just might need some guidance on how to put it together and how to get it out there. So make sure, folks, you head over to her website. Say your website again one more time.
Brooks Goldman Publishing, and it's Goldman with 2 N's, .com.
Gotcha.
And if we have just a minute, I wanted to mention one other thing. I mentioned that I teach on Zoom for ASU, and that's on the front page of the website, that class that's coming up the end of February for 4 Saturdays. But also January 17th, I'm doing a Zoom. That's Zoom, and I'm doing a Zoom, which is a free event for 2 hours to just sort of do an introductory through the Arizona Authors Association. So they're on the front page of the website if somebody's interested in signing up for either one of those, or contact me with questions about them. But the 2-hour introductory is a great way to sort of wet your whistle, for whatever else we want to call it, to get you excited about doing it. And then we get serious in the class that I teach for ASU, because it's actually 8 hours, but they're both on Zoom. So wherever you are in the world, you can jump in.
Oh, that's great. So yes, head over to brooksgoldmanpublishing.com. That's Goldman with 2 N's. And she has so much information there, including the Scottsdale Society of Women Writers and all this information about news and events. So thank you, Patricia. This has been absolutely wonderful. And we'll definitely have you on again to pick your brain on more topics.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad we did this.
Wasn't that wonderful to listen to Patricia L. Brooks talk about the art of memoir writing? Wow. And head over to her website, brooksgoldmanpublishing.com, to learn more about her, those events, the Women's Writers Group, and her classes at ASU and Paradise Valley Community College, local friends. And I hope that you've been encouraged to maybe dive into memoir writing. Like I always say, someone out there needs to read your story. So deeply consider it, take it to prayer, and see what the Lord has for you. Your story matters, and it just might be unique enough to publish. And I hope that you've also been encouraged to keep going on your writing journey, overcoming obstacles, trying to write something every day. But most of all, thanks for listening. Until next time, God bless.